This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 65. It's part one of a two-part series. The subject, how to quit your day job and never go back. If you're trying to transition from full-time employment to 100% self-employment, this is the episode for you. How to quit your day job. That's coming up on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
I was hiking earlier today and I came around the corner on the trail and there were 3 deer just standing right smack dab in the middle of the trail and they didn't move and I didn't know what to do. So I go up to them and I get about maybe 4 feet from these deer and it's a mother and 2 little fawns and they still don't move. So I'm like, well, do I weave around them? There's really no way to go off the trail and go around them. I didn't want to go through them and get in between a mother and her kids. So I just had to wait for a minute until they moved off the trail, but they didn't seem to care about me at all.
Yeah, can you believe that? The nerve of them in the forest.
I usually think animals are a little bit afraid of people, but these deer did not care that I was there.
Well, sometimes if you're on major trails, they're so used to seeing people, they don't have their natural defenses.
That had to be what was going on. I just didn't want to be like on the next episode of When Animals Attack or anything like that.
Well, you could have stepped in between the mother and the kids, and that would be exactly what would happen.
Well, I don't know. These deer seem pretty chill, but...
Well, yeah, that's just good PR, though. That's because we've watched Bambi and we've seen all these really friendly-looking deer all our lives. But yeah, they're nothing to mess with.
Yeah, I did not want to be on the 6 o'clock news, like, girl got attacked by deer on trail. I just didn't want to be that person.
That's a life flight you out of there.
Oh, gosh, no.
I did that once. I stepped between a black bear mother and a black bear cub. Not a good thing to do.
Why would you do such a thing?
I wasn't aware that I did that. I came around a corner and there the mother was racing at me.
Oh, what'd you do?
I ran like hell. And fortunately, I was at the top of, it's called Mount LeConte. It's in the Smoky Mountains. And there were, I guess, cabins there. Some kind of structure where you could sleep in. You don't sleep in a tent at the very top. And I ran into one and saved myself.
Well, good.
Learned how to run fast that day.
And you are here on the Red Podcast to talk about it.
This is the Red Podcast. And if you're looking for more clients, you want to sell more of your products, build an audience of loyal fans and customers via personality-based marketing, this is the podcast for you. I hate to say it, but we're for everybody, Laurel.
Are we?
Well, not really. We're not for everybody, but if you're listening this far, we're probably for you. If you're an author, speaker, writer, blogger, if you've got a message, we can help you spread that message. Most people, me and Laurel included, we didn't just get here. We were working day jobs, doing other things to fund our business before the business would fund itself. And that's the problem. It's easy to quit a day job thinking that everything is going to be okay, but it's tough to make it stick. How do you transition? That's what we're going to talk about. Real quick, side note, if you're curious about the very last time that I quit when I finally made it stick, we've got a whole episode about that. That is episode number 7. It's at redpodcast.com/7. Laurel had a similar transition the final time she quit a day job, episode 6, redpodcast.com/6.
This subject is really near and dear to my heart. I talk about it a lot. And I find that there are just some things that would help entrepreneurs like you listening in today. If you have a job and you don't want to have a job, there's some things that are going to help you make that transition, because most of the clients that I work with are looking to make that transition. Or if they've already made it, they could have made it a little more smoothly and a little more easily like I could have. So today we're going to dive into ways that you can easily make this transition into self-employment without hitting all the bumps in the road that you and I did, David.
There are a lot of them. Yeah, it took me a few times to do it. So sometimes somebody is in the transition, but they've also had a transition or two before the one they're in now. So that's not uncommon. We want to make sure this is the last transition that you are able to make this stick. And the first thing I think that's important when you are going from your day job to being self-employed full-time, I think it's to get clear on finances. And for me, that was in a lot of ways a mindset shift. For a few years, I was used to collecting a paycheck. Even from the time I was in high school, working at the ice cream store, for example, I was used to getting paid the first and the 15th of the month, every Friday, every other Friday, whatever the schedule is. But you're used to a regular paycheck coming in. And when you're self-employed, there are ups and downs. There'll be times when you might make 5 figures, let's say, and there'll be maybe a month or two where you make 0. So it's not steady like a day job, but there is an opportunity for you to balance it, but you do have to plan for that.
That was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my head around, is kind of the ups and downs or the sine curve that happens during the year in your business. So what I had to do was, instead of just looking at my business month to month and saying, okay, was I successful this month? Did I make enough money this month? Look at it as the entire year and start to calculate my finances using the entire year. When I first quit my job, I got into retail. And of course, with retail, you have the holiday season, which is when you make most of your money. So if you calculate your monthly income in February, say, you're going to be like, oh, this isn't working at all. You know, you have to factor the whole year into it. So take all that into consideration when you're thinking about your finances, not just 1 week or 1 month at a time.
Yeah, most people probably know this, but we know the term in the United States, Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And the reason that it is called Black Friday, because that is when retailers traditionally start to show a profit. That's the end of November usually. That says something about the ups and downs of retail. That's almost 11 solid months of not making a profit. They make all their money within the last 5 weeks of the year. So there are ups and downs, usually not quite as drastic as retail, but you're going to see that in your business regardless of where that is. So get clear on that and prepare for that.
That's definitely what I found being a coach as well, as there are ups and downs during the year. There are times that people really kind of gravitate towards coaching and times when they don't. And if you know what those times are, you do your marketing during those times, you spend a lot of time on social media during those times, and you really prepare for the up times and the down times. Take it into consideration and don't think of it like, oh, well, I didn't make money this 2-week period. You just can't think like that anymore. It's just a different game.
Right. And to help you do that, my suggestion is that you become a lean, mean machine. It's easy to think when you're having those regular drips of income that you can make monthly payments on things or you can buy little things here or there. I would look at your finances and say, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I don't need. What is it that you can't live without? Laurel, you and I were minimalists. We really believe that less is more. And I think a lot of the transition that it took for us to be those type of people, because I wouldn't say that we necessarily grew up in minimalist households, but I think just being an entrepreneur, it gets you really clear on what you need and what you don't need. It's an energy management thing.
I have my clients that want to quit their job. I have them make a spreadsheet or a 3-column chart, if you will. And one column is must have, the next column is nice to have, and the third column is don't need. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. And fill out all your current expenses and things that you spend money on and put them in one of those 3 columns and get really clear on what you need in your life and get really clear on what you don't need. And get rid of those things that you don't need. I absolutely did this before I quit my job. And I gave up things that were nice at the time, but didn't serve me. I said, would I rather have this or would I rather have a life of freedom and have some money in the bank? Some of those were tough decisions. Some weren't, but it got me really clear and it made me that lean, mean machine.
And we're not making judgment on what it is that you need in your life. That's up to you. What we do want you to come up with, though, is a number that you need to live. And once you have that number, you can adjust your business accordingly to make that amount of money.
And it might take a couple yearly cycles for you to really understand, okay, how much money can I make in the year and how can I divide it up? Sometimes it takes a little bit. And I think that takes us to our next idea.
Yeah, speaking of clarity, not only do you want to get clear on finances, but you also want to get clear on what your big idea is. Your idea, whatever it is that you're going to do, whatever it is that you're going to sell, it needs to be tested ahead of time. And there are various ways to do that. Laurel, when you quit to start your retail store, was that tested? Was that a tested idea?
It was not tested in the Nashville market, which is where I opened it. So I had done research, I'd done some other testing of the products, but not in the way that I should. This is something that I would tell other people to do, is test your business idea. Even if it's on a very small scale, you want to know that your idea is sticky. You want to know that people are going to buy it, and you want to have some time in the game to maybe see how those yearly cycles are going to go for you.
And that could be really, really easy. It could be really small. For example, Laurel was selling clothing, ecologically friendly clothing. It's made out of hemp. It's recycled materials, that kind of thing. That could have been done today on Etsy, eBay, Amazon. You can sell your stuff directly through Amazon. So you could test a lot of things online before jumping into the big stuff. For example, retail stores. For me, I started off in the music industry. And before I was in the industry, per se, I was a musician. So I knew there was a need for the services and products that I offered. And that's the way that I tested it. Testing varies. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily start with an official test. Sometimes it's just spending time in the market yourself.
Well, we were watching Shark Tank the other day, David, and they had the guy on there with the floating mug. Do you remember that? It was a coffee mug that was designed not to make a coffee ring on a table.
Right. You don't need a coaster when you've got the floating mug.
And the sharks were saying that they didn't really think that idea was really good, but he had a different idea for a glass that didn't sweat on the table, which they thought was a better idea. But he was saying, look, it's this coffee mug that I put into the market, that I've proven that there is a market for this on a small scale, and that I can do this, and it can prove that something else bigger can happen. And I thought that was really interesting, is you don't have to test necessarily your exact model, but you have to test that people like the idea, or like the product, or a similar product, or a smaller version of your product, or just something to say, hey, my idea is valid.
Yeah, you could do that with the blog. Red Podcast was a test. We had an agreement to do a certain number of episodes. Once we found out that people liked it, that we liked working with each other, it had some legs on it, then we renegotiated the agreement. My syndicated radio show, Music Business Radio, same thing. We proved the concept, and that's when we started expanding it via syndication. I think with your big idea, whether you're in the testing process or you know that it's going to work, you have to ask yourself, can you communicate it and let people know what it is? That's very, very important. Laurel, you've got Project X, the secret project that we haven't announced publicly yet, and that's one of the things you're working on right now.
Yes, I am launching a new business on Kickstarter coming up here. That's something that came up for me, is I was trying to tell somebody about it. I'm not officially announcing it, but I was trying to communicate it, what I was doing, to somebody, and I couldn't quite get the words out. Like, it all made sense in my head, and it was all good, and it's great. And then I try to get the words out to tell somebody in 1 to 2 short sentences what I'm doing, and it didn't come out right. So you need to be really clear on not just what you do, but how you're going to tell somebody else what you do, because that's the only way you're going to get the word out about it. So what I need to do right now is actually sit down and write out, okay, what is my elevator speech for this business, to get it across and communicate it and share the message with others.
Speaking of Kickstarter, that's another way to test the idea, and that's actually what you're doing, is testing. It's not really launching the business via Kickstarter, but you're seeing if the current idea, as you've laid it out, has legs.
Exactly. And I think that helps you get clarity on what you want to do. And even if it doesn't work, well, you move on to the next thing.
So you've gotten clear on your big idea. when you're making this transition from working a day job where that's your sole source of income, your primary source of income, to doing something for yourself, I think that it's helpful. This is what I've seen from watching dozens and dozens of people go through this also. It's helpful to have either what I call a big gig or a big product. And that's something that's maybe taken off because you're selling it online. That's your big product. Maybe it's a book that you've written where you've got this foundation and you know that there's a little bit of money, or maybe a lot of money, coming in every single month. Perhaps it's one client that's hiring you to work as a consultant or a contractor. That's a good transitional job, I think, from working like an hourly 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job, having that one client, because it's usually a temporary thing. Maybe it's for a year, maybe it's for 6 months, maybe it's just for a few weeks. So you can start to think not in terms of, hey, I'm going to do this forever until I decide to quit, or you start to think, hey, this thing is ending, and what am I going to do next? And that is the self-employment mindset. Something else to think about as far as the big gig goes, if you don't have one client that you're doing any kind of consulting or contract work for, you could have a series of recurring transactions. I've been mowing the lawn since we moved into this house. We've been here about a year. I really like mowing the lawn. It's time away. It's quiet. It's like alone time where I can think. But unfortunately, my time is getting so tight that I've had to go and find somebody to do this. So I was thinking about, hey, how would a lawn care guy start his business? And here's the way that a lawn care guy would do it. Here's a way that you could do it. So your lawn needs to be mowed, let's say every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks, maybe every week. Well, you set up a series of recurring transactions. Maybe you need 5, maybe you need 10 of them. Instead of going for that one big gig, that one client where there's one big check, if you can go for multiple streams of income, even if it's just doing the same thing for different people, if you've got maybe 1 or 2 people drop out of 10 or 20 that you're working with, well, that's not going to affect you like one person dropping out when you've only got one client is. So in your transition, if you're looking to transition, if you can work with as many clients as possible, just doing little bitty things for them, that's going to help with the cash flow, that's going to help with collection, that's going to help with regularity of work, and that's going to help you ease your mind because you're not like that little bitty ship being bumped around by one big wave, that one big client. You've got a bunch of little waves that are guiding you along.
This can definitely help you feel better as well, since you don't have that steady income. If you can make it a little steadier by using these tips that you just talked about, David, I think that just helps you feel better and keeps you motivated to keep going. It's just these little wins that you have along the way.
And working with different people, here's another good thing about it, is you get to come in contact with different opinions, different needs. You really get to see what people need. I think the problem that a lot of people face when they quit their job to become a consultant, to become a contractor, if you're just going to work for one person, you start to think, oh, that's how it's done. Well, that's a trap. You get into trouble when you say, this is the way that we've always done things. It really helps with innovation when you can work with as many people as possible. And like I said, you don't have to worry about one person just bailing on you. You've got so many people lifting you up. It's like the guy in the mosh pit, crowd surfing. You want a lot of people lifting you up, not just one.
Basically, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
More or less, yes.
I think the next one is to get connected. Is when you are self-employed, you can't do this alone. And that was something that I struggled with when I made my transition. Is honestly, I didn't know very many people who were self-employed. All my friends, all my family members, everybody that I knew had a job, and thought I was kind of nuts for quitting my engineering job. So you want to surround yourself with people who don't think you're nuts, who have gone before you, quit their job, started a business, and find like-minded people who can lift you up during those down times and also help you sustain your business and sustain your lifestyle.
And not only just support like that, but the more people that you know, the more people know about opportunities for you. Do you remember that guy in college? Maybe he's in a fraternity or he's on some kind of student government or some kind of committee where he just knows everybody. And this dude is probably not the best student. He's doing all things social his 4 or 5 years of college. And you wonder, how is that guy going to do when he gets out into the real world? Well, those people usually do pretty well because they know so many people, and you can use that same concept with your business.
In this case, of course, we're talking about how to make the transition into self-employment easier, and this is a way to do it. But this is something, David, that you and I do all the time. It's not just something you do to transition. It's something that I'm currently wrote a list of people to reach out to today. It's something I'm continuously doing as a small business owner.
Yeah, Project X has its own list of people that you need to connect with. Any kind of book that I'm launching, any kind of project. This podcast, Red Podcast, it threw us into a brand new community of people that we didn't know, the podcasting community. And I found that most people are very open about accepting you in their community if you're enthusiastic and you go in there with an open heart. And they're actually very approachable and happy for you to be there because you're bringing in something from another community that might help them.
A lot of times when I reach out to people, sometimes if I know it's somebody who just has a lot going on and isn't someone to just fiddle around, I'll offer to pay them for their time just to meet them and ask them a couple questions and just to show them that their time is valuable to me. And usually they don't make me pay for anything, but they show up, they know that I'm serious to connect with them, and we establish a good connection from having respect for them and their time. But I think you do have to get over any fears that you have of reaching out to other people in your industry and just go ahead and do it and start making those connections now. Like the sooner the better in this case.
Yeah, I think that's scary for a lot of people, just walking up to somebody in a group saying, "Hey, I'm David," holding out your hand, and just kind of waiting for that awkward silence to disappear when they figure out what it is that you're doing there. So it can be very scary to do that, but I think it's one of those things that gets easier with time. I would suggest if you're looking to build this skill, joining different meetup groups, going to night classes, adult education classes, go into places that you haven't been before, and just when you hear something that's interesting going on, walking up to somebody and say, "Hey, noticed you were talking about this," or "saw you had this." And you can do it any number of ways, and I think it's just one of those skills that some people have, but it's definitely one of those skills that a lot of people can develop.
But don't try to be an island of one. That's something that I tried. It doesn't work. You really need to get connected with people. You need to have that strong support group when you make that transition.
This is part 1 of 2 in our series on how to quit your day job and never go back. On the next episode, redpodcast.com 66, we'll be talking about more ways to do this. Until then, if you've got questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. We are available via the website, redpodcast.com. There you will find information on how to contact me and Laurel, or both of us. We would love to hear from you. If you like what we're doing, you can help us by spreading the word. When you go to iTunes, search for Red Podcast. You can leave us a review there, leave us a rating. You can also tell a friend. We'd appreciate that. That will help us to build the real entrepreneur community. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode where we will continue the discussion on how to quit your day job and never go back. Episode number 66. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.